Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. We have an action-packed week this week because of the big Steelers and Browns brawl. But before we get into that, let's hit on some high tempo. Matt, what do you got for us this week?
Job and interview advice for people. So when you're going on a job interview, what colors do you think you might wear to a job interview?
Are you talking about dressing up?
If you wore, I would say maybe dressing appropriately, not wearing something that might offend your potential boss. Who finally gets his wish, who talks with NFL owners and GMs and has his workout schedule. He shows up wearing a Kunta Kinte shirt from the Root Show. So he shows up wearing that, which potentially offensive to some of his potential employers. And then they move venues, they move times, they change everything around from Kaepernick's agents and personnel people. And then he's going to be angry when the NFL doesn't come along. At this point, why would you be absolutely nothing that he could have did at that point that would make an NFL owner, unless you're in absolute dire straits that and I don't even know, why you would bring him on board unless you absolutely had nothing left to gain and we're going to plug him in as your starter. Because even if you bring him on as, say, a backup, like I'll use Pittsburgh as an example. Say the Steelers were to bring him in as a backup because they weren't happy with their backup quarterback play, immediately his people would be really pushing for him to be the starter. And if his play wasn't good and you went to replace him, it would just be that they were racist for pulling him in the first place. So it would be a no-win situation. And I can see the teams are going to pass on him at this point.
I said it last week. It was all for show. I knew he wasn't serious about coming back into the league. And you could tell that based on the moving of the venues and changing the workout and everything like that. The guy doesn't want to play. He had the media there. They had the closed workout set up already. You don't change venues like the day before the show. And then even the coverage of it, the NFL said that they had whatever amount of teams. I don't even remember what it was, 25, 15, something like that. Somewhere in like the upper range, more than half. And then ESPN reported that only 8 teams actually showed up because he changed the venue. And they had already had hotels and everything set up at the other place. So, it's just something that he's trying to get publicity for, and it's working. And at this point, I really don't care. Anything else you got on it?
The other part to it is that typically other NFL franchises, when they work a player out, have access to the workout footage. And so that was also partly why it wasn't as big of a deal. But by changing it, like having a special workout time, it just set a bad precedent for other free agents. Typically it's done, I believe, on Tuesday, where they work players out. And they went out of their way to do a special workout for him. And then it's like you completely take where they were going to use the Atlanta Falcons facility so that they were going to have all their audio stuff available. Their people are available. I can see negotiating some of the stuff. Like if you've been working out with certain receivers and you want to do that, I'm sure that's stuff that could have been negotiated ahead of time. It felt like it was sloppily pushed at the last minute.
Yeah, it's all for show. And I know, like you said, other people aren't getting these workouts. And if he really wanted to make a statement and he wanted to prove, why not just live stream it? I tried to look and see if there was any of that going on. Show the full workout to everybody. Because that would be the way to get public pressure. If you're showing that you can hit guys on a dime, running deep routes, and then you're fans of another franchise that's going through like their third quarterback because of all the injuries that are happening this year, then you're going to get some pressure to get signed, almost like Tim Tebow. There were a lot of pressure on him, even in Major League Baseball the year the Mets were floundering. A lot of fans wanted him called up, and it almost happened. And he didn't have the stats, but if the fans want it, the fans can get some stuff done. So put it out there. Show them that you're ready to play, but he didn't do that. Speaking of fans and social media, my high tempo, we're going to talk about the a lot of the Penn State, Ohio State game later on in the show. But off the top, Sean Clifford, quarterback for Penn State, deleted his social media and said that he's sick of the death threats, which to me is just crazy. But at the same point, you almost have to wonder why some of these guys even have social media. And I know it goes back to the making money type thing where you can't make money while you're in the NCAA, but at least if you're on social media and you build up a big enough following, even if you don't get drafted by the NFL, there's still an opportunity from you once you graduate or play your last game to then hit up advertisers and try to do something before your name goes away, because you're always going to have your fan base that you can advertise to. And I would imagine that's why a lot of players have them. But to be fair, I think a lot of schools could really improve that department of teaching kids how to handle social media stuff and even helping them set it up, and possibly even having like the social media team on campus or even athletics or something running those accounts for students to help build them up as a way to say like, okay, when you graduate here, we're going to turn your account over to you. And by that time you'll have picked up however many followers like normal, but then you still don't have the impulse of like the guy we talked about a couple weeks ago that went crazy on social media. You don't have that. You wouldn't have control, and you really wouldn't have to worry about it. But it's a changing world, and 5 years from now, it might be totally different. But do you have any thoughts on that as a coach? How do you handle it with your players?
I think it's something that it's another one of the factors that you really don't have a lot of control over. You can try to encourage them to be smart with it, and you can provide as much education. But at the end of the day, people are going to do what they're going to do. I mean, you hope that they make good choices, and you're there to support them. It's just the thing that hurts is that a lot of these college athletes are doing it on a stage that maybe they don't recognize how far of a reach they actually do have. So people were able to reach out, and it's filtering some of the negative people, because a lot of times social media just becomes this toxic cesspool where you're able to just reach out and just say the most ignorant things without having to face, you wouldn't, a lot of these social media warriors would do nothing in a face-to-face meeting. It's easy to hide behind your keyboard and say whatever you feel like, knowing that there's going to be no repercussions from that. So I think some of it's just teaching people to filter them out. And actually, I use some of that as an example with my players, where they pick up on the people that yell the most ridiculous stuff from the stands, and we kind of comment on it, like it don't let that stuff phase you, because they have no idea what's going on in our program and why we do certain stuff. So you just build on it and hope that they grow and understand.
Yeah, that's true. I think a lot of people don't understand the reach that they have. And so I think a lot of schools could really take advantage of that, at least from a recruiting aspect, and show kids like, hey, these are some of our recruits. And that's why I think if they took it over and or at least help guide students to show like, hey, as it so-and-so is going on to the NFL or whatever sport they're in, basketball, you can see like, look, they have like millions of followers and they're getting extra opportunities because we set that up for you. And I think a lot of schools don't do that at all. And I could see that being a pretty big recruiting advantage in the next couple of years, especially as you wait to see if players are going to be able to earn money, because during the season, you'd be able to do that. I mean, they have apps now where you can throw up and like a video, and give a personalization to it. I forget what it's called, but like a lot of movie people try to do it, where you could have like your favorite movie star tell you happy birthday for $20 or something like that. And so I could see a lot of college athletes being able to take advantage of that if they are on social media. But block people, turn off your DMs. You can also block phrases. So if you really wanted to, you could block all swear words instead of deleting your account. So there are other ways around it to filter all of that stuff out. And I'm sure someone even has a complete list of stuff that you can just copy and paste right into Twitter if you really wanted to. But let's get into the big topic this week. Steelers-Browns. Obviously, we're disappointed here. I've talked about it. I didn't realize we haven't lost to the Browns since, 2014 or something, I think. It's been a long time. Last year was a tie. And so I had said, like, we need to get these 3 games. You said it's not going to happen. But history said it could have happened. But it didn't. Because the Browns just wanted it more, I felt like. The Steelers are a young team. And, yeah, they're going to have issues. They're going to have issues on offense. They're going to have turnovers. And there have been injuries. Connor went out. Juju went out. And as hard as I've been on Juju this year, you really don't have depth at wide receiver. It's not like in past years. I even joked with you after the game, are they going to start bringing back Antonio Brown? Because what else is out there at this point, this time in the season? They're bringing in practice guys on Thursday night to play. Now then Juju goes down, and what are you really going to do? Where are you going to turn? Luckily, the Bengals this week, I don't think they have a win. Can't lose that game. I don't care if it goes down to the wire. I don't care if it goes to overtime. Steelers cannot lose this game if they actively want to make the playoffs, because you play them, have to get revenge of the Browns to turn it into a 7-5. I wanted 8-4. Hopefully we get 7-5. And looking at it, you're going to play the Bengals, and then you get the rematch with the Browns at home. I think they can do it, but at this point, you got to get healthy. Can the defense carry them? What are your thoughts, Matt, before we get into the after game, I guess, end of game celebration fight last week?
Well, I think you're going to look at yes, they're going to win this week. The Bengals are horrid. They have no offense. Their defense has given up a lot of points. It's an absolute competing with Miami to be the worst. Absolutely. I see Pittsburgh being in a situation where they're in a must-win against Cleveland the last week of the regular season and struggling because of the stupid play, you're losing players that you didn't need to lose, and I think it's going to come back to bite them. I don't know that they have the depth that they could have afforded to lose those guys, and you're gonna see it. It's gonna look worse because of it.
It's 100% going to look worse, and that's when it comes down to, can the defense put enough pressure on to get this offense good enough field position to go back to old Steelers football? And not a lot of people want to see that, where you're settling for field goals and you're feeling good about it, because you know the defense is going to be able to get you the ball back, and you might be able to win a game 13-10 or whatever, 9-7. I just don't know if the defense is there yet. Too young. I'm not as optimistic. I wouldn't be. I think they're going to beat the Bengals, but I wouldn't be shocked at this point if they lost, just because of the injuries on offense. And if the Bengals get one turnover in the right situation, 2 turnovers, they could easily turn the game around. And you know the Steelers' offense isn't going to do anything. So I want to see them go back to the play calling they had with Duck Hodges, where they're spreading the ball around, setting guys up in positions to just move the chains and kind of play time of possession. They got away from it. It seems like they're just trying to take deep shots. And why? Why are you doing that? I understand doing it a couple of times a game, because on one hand, it's like the opposite. If people listen to the show know that I'm a big Michigan Wolverines fan, and Harbaugh barely ever takes deep shots. So on Saturdays, I'm watching the game. It's like possession, dinks and dunks, controlling the clock. Maybe he'll take a deep shot. Every time he takes it, it seems like it works out because the other team's not expecting it at all. Then he never goes back to it. Steelers, on the other hand, it's like, okay, you're throwing out a bunch of receivers off the practice squad and you're just throwing deep like every third play. Like, what are you doing? At some time, it's not going to work, because you're not landing them.
That's also reflective of what they're doing on first and second down, too. When you find yourself in a spot where you're not getting 3-4 yards on the first 2 plays, and you put yourself long, then you're going to have to put yourself in a spot where you got to drive the ball down the field. They're not getting the yardage that they need to on the early downs to be able to be consistent like they were in the earlier parts of the year.
But that's why I think it's because of the first down play call. You're running deep routes, you're taking sacks, and of course there's been some penalties and things like that. But then you're running up the middle. Of course, when you're not able to move the ball and spread it around, throw some screens. And I don't mean a screen to your running back. Throw it to the wide receiver, try to get some guys in space out there. Do more of like, it's almost like a 180, what they called when Hodges was quarterback, to Rudolph. Yeah, he might have the stronger arm, but you don't have to abuse it, because the longer he's in the pocket, the more he's going to get hit. And we saw it at the end of the game. He dropped back, threw a pass. Myles Garrett hit him late. Brown's defensive end, highly recruited. I think he was like number 1 overall in the NFL draft, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember Browns guys too often. I kind of like block them out. But he hits him late, landed on him, and you could see from the replay that I thought, okay, he hit him. They always tell the guy not to land on him. I don't think there was enough that they could have threw a flag. Rudolph then immediately tries to get him off him by pulling his helmet. And I know he's like 6'4", 270 pounds, Garrett is. But it's not like Rudolph is like this tiny little man where he's not used to like a guy laying on him. I couldn't see anything. I watched the replay. I watched different angles to see if Garrett was maybe grabbing him under like the pile or whatever. There wasn't really much of a pile, so I didn't see anything like that. Only 2 guys. And Rudolph tries to rip his helmet off. Then Garrett retaliates by ripping off Rudolph's helmet, showing his strength. And he reached back and took a swing and hit him in the head. Because, again, Rudolph is coming at him. At that point, you're the quarterback. You need to know, hey, I know you had to know what was happening. You tried to rip his helmet off. He ripped your helmet off. You should immediately be turning to the ref. Peyton Manning never would have went over and put himself in a situation to get hit in the head with the helmet. Tom Brady would never put himself in a situation. I'm all for protecting yourself and being hard, but you're the quarterback. Let Pouncey do that. He was taught by the best, Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer had those guys. They know how to protect each other. He's out there. He came over. They fought him down. Pouncey's kicking him in the head. I thought, well, this is interesting. Rudolph hit in the head. Luckily, Garrett had like turned his hand, maybe because the face mask. He was like trying to club him. And he hit him with like the earpiece side of the helmet, so it kind of buckled and didn't look like it hit him real good to where he could have been injured. But if he hit him with the top of the helmet, that could have knocked him clear out after he had already been knocked out before by having his mouth hung open when that high hit against the Ravens. Like, what are you trying to do? End your career? You're a 3rd-round quarterback. Protect yourself. And that, I mean, I'm all for Garrett. He's suspended for the rest of the year. I thought that was going to happen. And I know where he's coming from, but like I've played sports. I've been on both sides of it. I've seen people, Charles Woodson came out and was like, what about the side from Mason Rudolph? Like all he had to do was walk away. You're the quarterback. Now, if that would have been a fight between 2 wide receivers or like the OBJ, we talked about him getting choked earlier in the year, go for it. Protect yourself. Do whatever you need to do. But not when you're the quarterback and that's a defensive guy that has however many pounds on you, 50 pounds. Like that's just nuts.
Well, and the part that you're leaving out in all this was that Mason Rudolph kicked and attempted to punch Garrett in the groin, which triggered a lot of this stuff to begin with. Like, who's ball kicking in the middle of the game? Like, don't do that stuff. And then you don't have your helmet ripped off. And one of the first things I thought of is with the way that those helmets are, with the ratchet chin straps, how is it getting pulled off your head in the first place? How loose is your chin strap that he snatched it right off your head? He must still be in concussion protocol, because why they should have it tightened to a point where it's not getting ripped off your head. If you're really looking at player safety and things like that, it shouldn't have popped off like that. For as well secured as both sides of the chin strap are, that thing should be practically glued to his head, which is why with Garrett's, when Rudolph tried to pull it off, it didn't come off, but magically he just barely touches it. It comes flying off Rudolph's head. Get your helmet on.
I think we knew he wore his helmet loose when he got knocked out. His mouth was hanging open. The helmet was loose. He took one right on the chin. I mean, they don't really enforce it. There was another one. Oh, man, I could be mixing up my NFL and college, but someone got hit and the helmet popped off and it was just dangling there. He still had a mouthpiece in. And I was thinking, like, how are you wearing the mouthpiece strapped to your helmet, but you have that tight enough that the helmet didn't just like snap off the mouthpiece, but you didn't have the chin strap tight enough to keep the helmet on in the first place? Like, what's going on? Like, shouldn't you be protecting yourselves? And that's where I think a lot of these lawsuits are going to open up, where insurance companies and players, they're not going to pay out if they can go back and point at a situation where, why is your helmet coming off so easy? Like, it obviously wasn't worn right. There are countless plays, like I said, on the knockout hit. Rudolph didn't have a mouthpiece in. That's one of the first things that they tell you to do to prevent concussions. Why do you think boxers all wear mouthpieces? Because your jaw, the impact from your jaw is what knocks you out. Causes concussions. Like, that's one more thing. They have clear evidence of him getting knocked out completely because he didn't have a mouthpiece in. How is a concussion lawsuit in 10 years going to pay out for him? Like, it's not. They're going to have all kinds of video evidence against these guys. And I don't think the NFL is training them, and even colleges going that far, to wear the equipment correctly. They're putting all the emphasis on like more of an appearance thing, like, oh, you need your knee pads. How many guys have had a cracked kneecap because of a knee pad? I could think of zero. Like, but you're going to focus all your time on that and like OBJ's watch, but you're not going to worry about all these guys with the helmets flying off. Like, it makes zero sense. That's the one thing that's going to open them up to tons of lawsuits, and they're not focusing on it. But, before I get you back another chance here, when you said about him going after the groin, that's why I wondered if Garrett was trying to goose him at first. That's why I was looking at all the angles to see if that's what forced Rudolph to maybe pull the helmet off. You always see about guys getting grabbed when they're underneath the pile or punched down there on the ground. But I honestly couldn't see that. I honestly didn't see anything where Garrett initiated, and maybe I'm wrong, other than the late hit and the laying on him. But even that's debatable. I mean, it wasn't even flag worthy.
Well, and I think part of that has to come back on Pittsburgh and understanding the situations. And I know, like, I've talked about this throughout the year with our team, but one of the things that I really emphasized was when you're playing a team and you know that historically when you've played them that it's been a dirty match and that, like, they played, you know, punching, kicking, gouging type stuff, you go in mentally with the mindset that they're going to do that kind of stuff. You have to walk away. And it actually came down to a point where 2 years ago I had a player that we specifically called timeout, and I said, guys, the team that we're playing has absolutely nothing to play for next week. They're not making the playoffs. So do not do something that's going to get yourself kicked out. And sure enough, the next play, one of my players threw a punch and was kicked out for a playoff game. So, you know, you emphasize it as much as you can, but at the end of the day, you have to recognize that it's something that you're playing for something bigger. And in the moment that Rudolph was kicking at Garrett and it triggered this whole fight, it got the lineman involved. And Pouncey now, is he out for the year too now?
I didn't think it was for the year, but unless they changed it, I honestly was so disgusted. I looked at the initial rolling. I think it was 3 games, something like that. And then I just kind of gave up on the weekend. Like, I knew going in with all these suspensions and injuries too, that's where I'm not high on beating the Bengals. It's not guaranteed. Like, the Bengals are going to be playing to win. They have, pretty sure they have a cushion where they can win a game or two and have the number 1 draft pick because of the Dolphins here. I'll bring up the standings just to double check. But, I mean, you have the suspensions, you have the injuries, you're on an easy part of your schedule. You should be cleaning house right now. Walk away. Bengals are 0-10. They're by far, I guess the Redskins I forgot about. They only have 1 win. But other than that, Dolphins have 2. So they would have had a game cushion if they do win. And maybe they're tanking. I don't know. I'll see if this says anything But I don't see anything about the suspensions on the Steelers page here on the NFL thing, of course. But they talk about Tomlin's role in it, and they blamed the Browns coach. It's like that's not in charge of like the brawl. What are the coaches going to do? Do you think they're encouraging dirty play? Like, come on, it's a rivalry game. There's 8 seconds left. The refs need to step in and be in a position where, hey, that doesn't happen. And at this point, they're expecting the quarterback to just walk away. Normally when linemen lock up, it's just a lot of pushing and shoving because those guys are huge. And then that's it. I mean, you see it all the time in college. It's not like guys are getting their helmets ripped off and hit over the head with them. That's just crazy. It's something you've never seen. A lot of outlets were talking about him pressing criminal charges, but I think you have to sign a waiver to play college football, NFL and college football, and just like hockey, when there's all these fights. I know there's some charges that have been brought up in hockey, but realistically, you're putting yourself at risk. It's part of the game. I don't know if he would have won that because they would have just had to show malicious intent, and if he did it on purpose or whatever, he could have claimed, I guess he couldn't really claim self-defense, hit him with the helmet. But I don't know. It's just crazy all around. He's not bringing up any criminal charges, which I thought would have been crazy on his part, and just a bit of further distraction to the Steelers. Anything else you got on that?
No, that was the big stuff. But it's just like, understand that you're the backup quarterback right now that lost the Browns in a game that you should have won. And sure, there was some tension there. But the bottom line is, do what you need to do early in the game. There's no reason it should have even come to that point if you take care of business and just put them away early.
Matt, you're 100% right. He's the backup quarterback. He has to realize he's fighting for his job. There's nothing given to him. They could easily go out and sign someone, trade for someone else, draft someone else. You need to walk away from that. How are they going to trust that you're the future? If you're putting yourself in harm's way.
What Hodges does. I want to see Hodges play again.
I wouldn't be surprised if they had to make a change like that, because I don't think Rudolph, at this point, he's getting into fights, getting knocked out. I wouldn't be surprised if he was injured again. You're putting a big target on your back, showing that, hey, you can get under my skin. Because that was a pretty big signal on Thursday night. And a lot of people talked about it from, I don't want to say like an anti-Steelers position, but more of like as a Steelers fan, yeah, I'm concerned about it. Because with Rudolph out there, now after seeing that, how am I supposed to trust that he's going to make good decisions to win the game? Honestly, do you feel confident that he's going to make a smart decision out there? Hell no. Hell no. To me, that pretty much wrapped up him losing his job going forward. Ben comes back, whatever. They want to sign someone. I honestly thought they should have went after, and he's injured now, so I can't remember his name. The quarterback that won it with the Eagles when he was a free agent.
Nick Foles.
I think they should just went after him as a contingency plan where, hey, we have a young core defense and we can sign him if Ben goes down because he seems to always get hurt. Then you have a quality backup. He's used to the backup role. And then if Ben does decide to retire, you could have him locked up for 3 or 4 years as you build another rookie quarterback, because now you're in a weird situation where you're on the backups. Are they going to get you to the playoffs? Doesn't look like it if they can't win against the Browns. I don't care if everyone on your team is injured. Tom Brady plays with a bunch of nobodies. That's a fact. No one is beating down New England's door to sign their wide receivers. No one.
Mohamed Sanu.
He was a Falcon. They brought him in late. The other guys, maybe Wes Welker?
Antonio Brown.
Yeah. That famous New England Patriot, Antonio Brown. That's what it'll be if the Steelers sign him back up. He said he's open to Pittsburgh. He even tweeted his support over Mason Rudolph, and I just thought, Oh my God, he'd fit in so well on this team. Could you imagine him in that fight? He'd have been throwing stuff off the balcony, like in his hotel room or whatever, his condo.
Already prepared for it.
So let's get into regular NFL stuff. The Patriots are in control once again. Tom Brady's talking about how the offense isn't clicking. I feel like we hear that every year right about now because they rely on the defense. I think they're tightening some things up, and they're not showing it. They don't have to show their all-around offense. They can start to save stuff for the playoffs, and I think that's where they're at. So don't fall for that trap listening to what the Patriots are putting out with, oh, the offense just isn't there right now. I honestly think if it happens every year, that has to be a coaching decision. I think Belichick start to pare down some of the playbook stuff. They run some extra stuff to see what works and what doesn't. And then they start to plan now for the playoffs. And it looks like they're going to be in that position to get home field advantage unless the Ravens can do something about it. But Ravens, another blowout win. I mean, their point differential, if you look at the AFC, because one thing I look at is the point differential, and I know that doesn't tell the entire story, but right now the Patriots are number one overall with plus 179. Baltimore's right there with plus 145. No other team is in double digits. Or triple digits, I mean. No other team is over 100. The next closest team is the Chiefs at plus 52. That's how far ahead the Ravens and the Patriots are, just in terms of destroying teams. And in the NFL, where gambling lines are usually 3 points or less, that is outrageous. So, I mean, even if the Steelers were to make the playoffs, you're going to have to face one of those two teams if you make it that far, and it's going to be nasty because the only other team on the NFC that has that type of point differential is the 49ers at 140. Everyone else around the league, not there. So, crazy. You have the Packers and Vikings starting to put a hold on the NFC North. You have Carolina kind of falling apart. And then you have the West, Seahawks and the 49ers. And I think that's where you get your wildcard team. I think you have the Vikings and the Seahawks right now. One of those two teams, or if they flip and win their division, is going to come out of that division. I think the NFC set right now, the playoff picture. So we have a couple weeks left to play. It's looking pretty clear in the NFC. The only team that you have to figure out is which team's going to win the NFC East, either the Cowboys or the Eagles. And man, I do not want the Eagles to get it. I just don't. It's satisfying watching Tom Brady's poor offensive outing just shut them down. I thought that was hilarious. Wentz is another guy. It's like you put all your eggs in that basket. You had Foles. What are you doing? Like, they deserve not to make the playoffs. And I know Foles got hurt, and I don't think you can plan around that. But come on. You guys, it took you however many years to win the Super Bowl, and you had the quarterback that did it, but instead you went with the guy that you thought could sell more shirts? Like, I don't understand the train of thought of going with Wentz because he hasn't shown me anything. As I watched him throw what would have been a game-tying touchdown, and he threw it to the middle of the field instead of leading his receiver, and he almost made the reach-back catch, and the commentators were like, he has to catch that. And I thought, and they kept saying how it was a perfect throw, and I thought, oh, if it was a perfect throw, he would have caught that no problem because he had like 4 yards on that guy. Perfect throw, like a perfect throw would have got that tied. Nick Foles would have made that throw. That's all I'm saying. That's the last of my NFL stuff. You got anything, Matt?
I was just looking at the playoff picture and thought how differently things are shaping up because you have at this point Kansas City's sitting at what, 6 and or
they're 7-4. They're a half game up on the Raiders. They haven't had their bye yet, I don't think.
So they're right there, where it could come down to where the Raiders could potentially end up winning the division. You're right. The two front runners are New England and Baltimore in the AFC. On the NFC side, do you think San Francisco runs away with it?
I've been going back and forth just because I don't know if they are for real. But the point differential, that I know not a lot of people talk about it, but that's the one thing I look at. And if you're able to put away bad teams in the NFL, then that means you're doing something right. And they've been able to do that. They let the Steelers hang around, but that was a Steelers team that was young and hungry. And possibly you had a quarterback with not a lot of tape on him. You win it anyway. Then you blow out teams like the Browns and the Panthers, teams like you're supposed to blow out. Sure, they lost to the Seahawks. I don't count the close wins against the Cardinals because that's a rivalry game in division. So it's going to be a big showdown. Packers, Niners. Is it Sunday night? Monday night? One of those nights coming up. It's on NBC. So that's a Sunday night game, right? So I think that's going to tell a lot. Because number one, I'm not a Packers fan. I don't think they are for real. I think they could make it to the Super Bowl just because of how weak the NFC is. So this will show if the 49ers are pretenders or not. I don't know if I have enough from Shanahan as a head coach that would show me if he could out-scheme Pete Carroll, though. If they were to make the playoffs, they already lost to the Seahawks once. They play them the very last game of the year. I mean, there's a chance that they could play them in the playoffs. Would they go for 3? Are they going to be able to get one? Get 2? I don't know. So that's going to be the other telling thing because they have to go to Seattle at the end of the year. But this Packers one will answer a lot of questions. What do you think? Who do you think wins that game, by the way?
I don't know. I'm kind of leaning at this point to just seeing what Shanahan brings to the table.
So what does that mean?
I think because of his offensive skill, I go with them.
I'm going to pick the 49ers because it's at home. I think Garoppolo can get it done. Do I think they deserve this season? No. I still hate Jed York. So we'll see. If the 49ers were to blow it and my pick was so bad that it was like a 42-10 Packers win, I wouldn't care at all. I would just laugh. So that's where I am on the situation. Anything else you got for the NFL?
Other than my fantasy team did a really good job this week picking up that win.
Matt, my team has been out. How many shows ago was that when I complained about injuries? I've had too many injuries this year. And at this point, that's the one thing that I hate about fantasy because you can have everything planned out. But when like 4 running backs go down, you just have to shake your head and say, like, not this year. I don't even know who to play half the time. And then when I do play them, they get like, 0 points? What did David Johnson get? Like 1 point? I had him on the bench, I believe, anyway. But it's like, Will Dissly goes down. I pick up a free agent. He immediately gets hurt. I'm like, I feel so bad. Why'd I pick you up? I feel like I ruined his season. So, just one of those years. But let's get into quick hitters. Pirates hired Ben Cherington from Toronto, I believe, as GM. And I have heard, I've talked to some people, I think they're going to let him do a complete rebuild. And I saw a fan poll, I think, was it the Post-Gazette? I can't remember, where they asked if fans would be happy or would be okay if they got rid of Josh Bell as part of that rebuild. Surprisingly, 60% of the people thought that it would be good to get rid of him. And at this point, I don't care if you're going to rebuild. Do it right. But nothing's going to change if in 3 years, 4 years, you get to the points where the Astros were, if you don't make the moves that they made to get to the World Series. And what I'm talking about is stealing signals, going for that extra run whenever you have to. They had a guy in the dugout banging trash cans whenever they were going to throw a curveball. I know we talked about it on the thing. Pirates need to be innovative like that. You're not going to get the best talent. Do whatever you got to do to win, baby. I don't care. They named people in that probe about stealing signs and stuff. It was like the Red Sox, the Astros. I'm like, oh, teams that have actually won the World Series. Who didn't they name? Pirates. At this point, Matt, I don't care. Pirate as a mascot is a guy that would just take whatever he want. He didn't care about anyone. Take no shit. That's what they need to start doing. Start winning. I wouldn't even care if they were like made it blatant. Had like people in the outfield with binoculars just yelling. They can't do anything if the fans are just yelling out what it is because they know what the signs are. I saw a clip. I don't even know if you saw this because this rant came out of nowhere. I didn't have it in our notes. But they had a clip that I saw where the MLB television guys, what they had was supposedly they had a guy in the dugout in the hallway watching the broadcast of the game. Because from that TV view behind the pitcher, you can see the catcher's clearly doing 2 for curve. So if it was an off-speed pitch, the guy would bang really loud 2 times, like basically showing what fingers he had up. 1, 2, 3, or whatever. To keep it simple, that's how I'm going to explain it on the podcast. So he'd just do 2 loud knocks so the hitter knew a curveball was coming. Then guess what? He wouldn't chase it. And it was working. And then they realized as the pitcher's going to throw, like he had to hear, because you could hear the trash can. I'll see if I can find the video and I'll put it on Twitter. But you could hear the trash can that loud. And you had to think, oh, obviously they knew they were stealing signs. Every time I throw a curveball, some guy smashes a trash can twice. Like, what are they doing? Then they had a huddle on the mound, and then guess what? They switched up the signs. Well, if you don't have the signs from 1940 in the first place, they're not going to be able to steal them. Change it up. So Pirates, go ahead and do that. Signing a new GM doesn't matter to me until you actually prove it by making some moves. I'm not going to applaud a deal. Number 2 on my quick hitters.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
Why are they saying that they're in a rebuild?
That's what has been leaking out, Matt. They haven't said it.
But how much more can you strip away at this point? Like, what assets do you have that you're wanting to rebuild on?
Matt, they ruined it whenever they made the Archer deal. You traded 4 prospects in that deal?
Who is worth a pint of piss in the organization? What are you going to trade Bell for? You get Dennis Eckersley? Bring back Raleigh Fingers?
Matt, they're going to trade him for some guy you can go to Altoona at the curve and sign, get autographs from.
Are they going to trade for Tim Tebow?
Hey, I would love it. I would immediately buy a Tim Tebow curve jersey. I think he's still AA, right? I'd have it. I'd even go up to Altoona to see if he'll sign it for me. Tim. Actually, I know what? I would even do that because I can get outfield tickets for that game for free. I'd just go sit in the outfield because was he a pitcher? No, he's outfielder. So I would call him over and ask him to give me a blessing. Why are you shaking your head?
What's wrong with you?
I would ask him to give me a blessing, and I'd say, "Oh, while you're here, you want to sign this jersey for me real quick?" And then I'd wear it on the show for a month straight, just like that Bo Jackson jersey I got for Christmas that one year. All right, my other quick hitter, Sidney Crosby, has surgery. Penguins are holding on; they're close to the wild card right now. Anyway, for hockey, if you're going to have surgery, now's a good time. I think they said, 6 weeks or something? So I'm not too concerned about the Penguins yet. We haven't really even talked about them this year. I don't know if they have enough. I just feel like they're limping along, going to get into the playoffs and have another early exit. But we'll see. We'll get into that once football's over because football's been too exciting this year. My last one, not really a quick hitter. Tua Tagovailoa, I hope I pronounced that right, from Alabama, quarterback. Alabama runs off Jalen Hurts, goes to Oklahoma. They put all their eggs in Tula's basket. He's a national championship winning quarterback. He came in the fourth quarter, made some plays to win a national championship. They're in a blowout game. Third quarter, it is a complete blowout. You already played your biggest game. You already played and you lost with LSU. There is zero reason for him to be out on the field, Matt. Zero. And you want to know why? Because Alabama has a soft schedule. Next week, they have an easy beat-em-up team. You can have your practice there. So Nick Saban comes out, and I have it up here on the board. He says that they were doing 2-minute drill practice. Why the hell are you running a 2-minute drill practice in the third quarter against an SEC opponent when you're up like 30 points or whatever the score was, 30 something to like 14? And I'm looking at this because I know I looked at it from the Michigan perspective. Harbaugh kept Shea Patterson in. Again, they're out of the Big Ten East race, so they really can't win the conference. I don't know what they're playing for. Is there a path for a Rose Bowl? Yes. Michigan would have to win out and either have Penn State or Ohio State win out in that situation, along with maybe some help by like Wisconsin winning the West and getting 3 losses. So Michigan theoretically could be the highest ranked team to get to the Rose Bowl. But you're playing Michigan State and Harbaugh's trying to run the score up. Nick Saban was not trying to run the score up. Why is he in? Why are you doing crazy offensive practice stuff in a game? Like, if you're going to practice new offensive formations where your quarterback can get hurt, do that against your scrub team you have scheduled before Auburn. Don't do it against the SEC team. And I think he knows he messed up. Because he like tried, any coach would have just been like, yeah, in the heat of a game, he took a hit, like as a freak accident. They said it was almost like Bo Jackson's hip injury. And I don't even know if I said it, so people might not listen to college football. But Tua was supposed to be possibly the number 1 overall pick for the NFL. It's just for the Steelers fans out there. And he suffered a freak injury on his hip. He was rolling out, throwing a pass. I think he was between 2 defenders. The way it landed, it didn't even look bad. But Bo Jackson's injury didn't look bad either. I think just the way it happened, it was like a fractured hip or something like that. So he's out for the year. And now, I mean, if the Steelers drafted him in the first round, I'd be pissed. There's no way to sugarcoat it. I know he was a potential number 1 overall pick. Steelers will be picking around the middle of the first round, it looks like right now. If they wasted, well, I guess they gave that pick to the Dolphins, but let's say they had a first round pick. Even if it was 30, 32 or whatever, if they picked him, I'd be pissed. Why would you waste your first round pick on an injury rebuild like that? So potentially ruined at least his money from the NFL. And I don't get it. I mean, you're a coach, Matt. Why is he in at that point?
Well, first off, he's not a senior, is he?
No. I think he's a junior, so he could come back.
So that's part of it, is that if you feel like your draft stock is going to fall, that you're going to drop off to like the second or third round because of the injury, don't go to the draft. Don't put yourself in that spot where you're cannon fodder in the NFL. Give yourself the offseason to recoup, to recover, to get yourself back, to prove that you can play a full season. That, you know, with what they said, the big difference between his injury and Bo Jackson's was that Bo Jackson didn't realize the extent of how injured he was. And so it didn't give him time to properly get the treatment that he needed, versus how quickly they responded with Tua, as they were able to get him into surgery and get things fixed so that he has a chance to make the full recovery. With that being said, if he's going to make a full recovery, then allow yourself to do all the rehab and come so that you guarantee yourself that top draft pick, because it's not guaranteeing yourself right now that you would even be a first-round quarterback. With looking at what Herbert's doing at Oregon and what Burrow's doing at LSU, he's potentially going to be your Heisman Trophy winner, that both of those guys are going to be getting NFL looks that you may not even be. Even if you declared and you weren't injured, it wasn't a guarantee that you were going to be the number 1 overall. Even Jalen Hurts could end up going out and being another quarterback that if you wait a year, it plays to your advantage come draft time when you don't have as much in the draft pool. I
think Hurts has to go, though, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying about him not going, and to the point where Bo Jackson's injury, I don't think it was so much that they didn't know the extent of it. I just don't think they had the technology they have now. Because I watched a couple of documentaries on Bo Jackson from like the surgeon perspective, and they had never seen an injury like that, because they said it was almost like his muscles were so strong, it broke the bone in a way that you only see in like elderly patients. and then they do like a full hip replacement when you're that old. Like they've never seen it in anyone so young. So we will see if technology has improved in 30 years or however long ago that injury happened, that's going to give him 100% recovery like they are saying. We will see, because Bose was so bad, like it hurt him to run to play baseball. And eventually he had to retire from just baseball, a sport where Jim Thome can eat 30 hot dogs and go out and play in the 90s. So, like, I don't know. We'll see what happens. It's just a bad injury. Could he come back and play in college? And at that point, like you're saying, if it's that bad, it's like a full hip one. I don't know how many people break their hip and come back, even if you're that young. At least try to get some money would be my thought on it. Going back to Alabama, if you don't recover, you're not going to get drafted at all. At least you have enough mystery that I think a team will still take a jump on you in the 3rd round. Wait, when did Mo Hurst go? Because I think that's a similar situation. Now, the injuries are totally different, but Mo Hurst was Michigan defensive tackle. He was at one point supposedly a top 10 pick. They diagnosed a heart issue with him, and he has been destroying it with the Raiders. Let's see if I can find it real quick. But he dropped like a rock. And I don't know if Tua just being a quarterback would fall that much. But Mo Hurst went with the 140th pick overall. So he's picked in the 5th round. So he went potentially a number 1, or he wasn't going to be over a number 1, but he was going to be in the upper 1st round just because Pro Football Focus had him rated that high, that he shot up the draft boards as a defensive tackle. Has a heart issue. He drops to the 5th round. Tua gets picked now in the 5th round versus if he stays at Alabama and has a bad year, he could not get picked at all. Like, I don't see him falling lower than Mo Hurst did. I think he gets drafted if he comes out. So we will see, do they draft him and sit on him for a year? Is it going to be a team like, would the Packers do something like that? Because I don't see a downside for a team like that where you have an established quarterback. It worked in the past when you did it with Brett Favre. Now, granted, it wasn't an injury, but you had Favre. You let Aaron Rodgers sit under him until he was ready. Aaron Rodgers, you know you're going to get a couple more years out of him. Bring in Tua, have him sit. You draft him in the 3rd or 4th round. I think it could work out. I personally, would I have drafted him number 1 overall? I didn't think he was the best quarterback coming out. At some point, it's a system quarterback gig, and that's the one knock I have on Oklahoma. At some point, you're throwing all these Heismans out from Oklahoma. When does it become a system quarterback? You're telling me growing up that Cole Brennan can't win it at Hawaii, and I think that was his name, because he had all these records because he was a system quarterback. Then you have the same guys at Oklahoma. It doesn't matter who they plug in there. They put up a ton of numbers, and what are they doing in the NFL? It's not like they're lighting it up. I mean, Kyler Murray has a couple wins. Baker Mayfield has done what? Nothing. He's been making poor reads every week. He can't get the ball to Jarvis Landry or OBJ. At some point, you have to say, okay, these Oklahoma guys are just system quarterbacks that can never win the big one. I mean, yeah, they came back and beat Baylor, but what else has Oklahoma done? Like, they're known chokers at this point, more so than LSU. I don't know, or even old Clemson. Georgia's on that level. Is that it? Georgia and Oklahoma, the 2 choke schools since Big Game Bob. I know you said it like it's a positive, but I remember Big Game Bob as like a joke. He got lucky with the 1 national championship. And after that, every big game they were in, they seemed to lose. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I feel bad for the kid. They were up 38 to, well, the final score was 38-7, so they were up against Mississippi State. You're late in the season. You have them beat. You have Western Carolina next week to practice any 2-minute drill stuff that you want. You can come out of the game, do it in the first couple series, keep your team healthy. But realistically, you have no backup quarterback. You haven't really developed anyone because you've run however many quarterbacks out of Alabama. We'll see.
But circling back to your earlier question, here's the other part to this. there's no substitution for live in-game playing to get film. You can try to simulate stuff at practice, and realistically, trying whatever it was that Saban was planning on doing, trying that against the team that they're playing next week probably would work regardless. So you want to, if you're wanting to try to tinker with something, and I've seen where teams have done this in the past, where you have a lead at halftime, you say, okay, here's certain things that we're not going to do going into the third quarter. We want to work on, and I know with some teams that I've coached, we've been in some situations where we've said, okay, we're not throwing the ball. We want to work on these run plays, knowing that there's a good chance that there's going to be some issues, but we want to get it on film so that we can break it down and show the kids this is what we need to do to improve on it. And I think you take that risk. Unfortunately, it played out. The thing that made me shudder when the injury happened was that Tua was already battling some injuries and was already kind of iffy to begin with. I don't know that if it's concept stuff that you wanted to work on, I think you could have done it with your backup and not put Tua in that spot, because if you're dealing with guys that are already injured, the last thing you want to do is put them in a situation where they can be injured further. And I wonder if that's factoring into some of that as well, where he was already injured and then the prior injuries set him up to be in a spot where now it set him up for a bigger injury now.
Yeah, that's what I missed. When I said about him being in the game, I understand that, yeah, you want to practice with your guys, but I forgot to mention he was already hurt. He was limping around the entire LSU game. I understand wanting to play because you're the team captain, and that's why I said he could have rested. I know Shea Patterson's not really hurt from Michigan. I use that as my example of a quarterback playing the entire game, but he's not hurt. At some point, you have to rest your quarterback up. Do you want to beat Auburn? Is it that important to run the score up on Mississippi State because you want to practice some 2-minute drill stuff? Practice it in the second quarter. Practice it the first series of the third quarter. Why are you waiting until you're up like 38-7? It makes zero sense. Let the guy heal up. Matt, he's a national championship winning quarterback. It's not Sean Clifford getting ready for the Ohio State game this weekend. Tua has won the national championship. There's zero reason for him to practice any game time reps. Zero reason. I mean, it's not like he came out and looked as bad as Clemson's quarterback, Taylor, this year. Trevor Lawrence, not Taylor Lawrence. What am I thinking? Jesus Christ. Trevor Lawrence, he looked awful. So that's the other side of it.
Alabama fans made me feel a million times better about Florida State's coaching situation, because after the LSU game and after the injuries with Tua, the hashtag Fire Saban was actually trending at one point. I don't even know what point, like how spoiled of a fan base you have to be to say, no, our coach that has won us multiple national titles and has us in being the prominent team, we're like, nah, let's get rid of him. He's not good enough now. Unbelievable.
I don't even know what they could do or what they would expect better. I just know that Alabama, the fact that you would have this injury and then be ranked so high in the college football rankings does not add up, because they're supposed to take that into account. I know Nick Saban's a great coach, but at some point it's on the quarterbacks. He hasn't done it in big games with the quarterbacks he kept around. What makes you think he's going to beat Auburn? And maybe they're thinking that it will work itself out, but we'll see. Anything you have on the ACC this week?
It's pretty much business as usual. Although the big thing, we took a year off last year, but you know what? The Noles are back to bowling, baby.
Oh my gosh.
Interim coach Odell Haggins got to 4, and Odell now is interim, and they're now bowl eligible, beating Bama State.
Oh, you mean Alcorn? Who do they play? Alabama State?
They played Bama. We beat Bama State.
Let's get into the big one. Big Ten East, the championship game de facto. I believe whatever team wins this game, I don't want to say 100% because Penn State could lose to Rutgers. If I think that's who they play. Or did they already beat them? I can't keep track of all these Penn State rivals that they have. So I don't know who they play during rivalry week, Matt. Used to be Michigan State. Now it's not Michigan State. Then it was Maryland. Now that doesn't work because they beat us at one time. Rutgers, is that who they can beat? They have to play a team that they're unrivaled against because otherwise the hashtag doesn't work, Matt. So I can't keep it straight, but they play Ohio State. Since they lost to Minnesota, if Penn State were to lose the following week, if they beat Ohio State, then Ohio State would be the champ. So this isn't really the championship game, but I'm looking it up right now. I think they play Rutgers, yeah. And if they would lose to Rutgers, that'd be so embarrassing that James Franklin should just retire. So I'm going to count this as the championship game. Whatever team wins this game is going to the Big Ten championship and setting course the Big Ten bowl schedule. So you're going on the road. Franklin has never really won on the road. So we'll do our picks real quick before I get into my breakdown. Who do you have, Matt?
I just think Ohio State just is humming right now.
Oh, Ohio State, I think, would blow them out. I haven't seen anything from Penn State on the road that has shown me that they can get up for a big game. You had Minnesota, and I know Minnesota lost to Iowa in a close one, but you had them in a position where come out firing and try to show that you're going to be a team that's in the national championship race. But because Penn State didn't do that, they lost to a team that's possibly overrated in Minnesota. We'll see, because it could be a very similar situation to the year when Ohio State destroyed Wisconsin like 55-0 on their route to a national championship. I think that was 2014. Penn State doesn't put teams away like that. So the fact that they're going to go into Ohio State, last time they couldn't get it done. They even had Saquon Barkley returning a kickoff early, and they couldn't hold on against them. I just don't think they're going to win in the shoe. If you can't win at the Big House against Brady Hoke, I don't think you're going to win against Ohio State at the shoe. Like, you might be able to trip them up at home. I just don't think it's going to happen. Now, why this game is important is for a variety of reasons. Like I had said, this game will help decide the Big Ten bowl record. If Ohio State wins, I think they're in the playoffs no matter what happens, unless they lose the Big Ten championship game by some miracle. Like, I think they're going to win the Big Ten championship game. If they were to lose to Michigan by some miracle, it doesn't matter. Like, I think Ohio State's going to go to the playoffs just because of the way the rankings have broke down. So we'll get into that at the end of the show. But Ohio State goes to the playoffs or Penn State. I think that's the Big Ten's only chance. I don't think Minnesota makes it even if they win out. And I don't think they win out. So then you have the Rose Bowl teams. If Minnesota wins out and loses to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, they could be picked for the Rose Bowl. I want to say the Rose Bowl changed it from the Big Ten where they pick either the highest ranked team or one of the teams, but you're either going to look at Penn State with 2 losses, Minnesota with 2 losses in that scenario. I think Michigan loses to Ohio State, so I think they have 3 losses. They could potentially get it. If Michigan wins out, beats Ohio State, I wouldn't be surprised if they got the nod and took the Rose Bowl, just because I think the college football playoff ranking will have them ranked the highest. If that happens and Michigan's sitting there at 10-2, I think they're ranked 13th right now with a win over Ohio State. I would think they would be in the top 8. And I think they get the Rose Bowl bid. I just don't think they beat Ohio State. So that's why this game is important this weekend. If Penn State wants some real chaos, they could win this week, get to the Big Ten championship, and I don't think there's any reason for them to get left out of the playoffs. If Franklin wants to make that next step, he has to win. And that leads me to my next topic, Matt. Call it coaching search update. His name's been thrown around, Franklin. How do you feel at him being a candidate in either Florida State or USC?
No.
Why not?
Well, at USC, fine. I think what I think Franklin does well. I think he recruits. I think he does an excellent job of making sure that the kids graduate on time. He keeps the academic numbers up. He's great at being average. I don't want to be average. I don't want to be mediocre. I don't want to be middle of the road. I think he does really well for Penn State, but I don't know that he has it in him to take the step to be a championship caliber coach. And I think people are content with him being what he is at Penn State and just being able to say, well, we were close. This year they were ranked in the college football, the playoff discussion once, and I think that's good enough for them. Because they were in the discussion. They got to hear their name called, and I think that they're content with that. So I don't want him in Tallahassee. I don't know that he has what it takes. If he wants to go to Southern Cal, I don't know why Southern Cal would want him. I think their eggs are still in the Urban basket, and I think they're going to try to push that they're going to beat that horse until it's dead.
I would say USC would be the absolute worst for him because you're right. His strength is recruiting. They already recruit themselves. Their issue is in-game coaching. That's Franklin's issue. So they would be going in the same exact direction that they're going in now. They might get a few more wins because the Pac-12 is not as strong. But to be honest, as an outsider looking at this, I don't think either of those jobs right now is more prestigious than Penn State. Penn State got hit with basically sanctions that were trying to be borderline death penalty, and they bounced right back. They have a ton of viewers. This game is going to be one of the most watched football games, even though it's at the big noon slot on Fox. Where else is he going to get that kind of publicity? And, you're going to get the scrutiny at USC, but do people actually watch them? I don't remember seeing a USC game in the top 10 most watched in a long time. Maybe since back at the Pete Carroll days. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some of their Notre Dame games were that high, but I'm going back to the Bush push. Other than that, people don't really care about them. Other than the media because they have studios right out there in LA. That's the only reason people talk about them. Same with UCLA. That's why they got that gigantic, was it Under Armour or Adidas contract? It's because people want them to be good because they know all those people in that area will buy that gear if they are. So, I don't know. Is that job worth it? I think any job on the East Coast at this point, with the way things are going and social media and all this stuff, I think are way more valuable. And until someone in the Pac-12 wins a national championship in the playoffs, I don't think that will change. Like, you would have to have Oregon or USC go on an Alabama type run to get back to it. And at this point, things have changed so fast with the television stuff and how they took all the wrong steps and lost a bunch of money. I don't know how they come back from it. So if Franklin leaves, I think he's completely nuts because you might not be competing with Michigan and Ohio State out there if that's what you're afraid of. Michigan State's fallen off. So right now it's 3 teams. You could split like it looks like you're going to do this year. Those teams didn't keep you out. You kept yourself out by losing to Minnesota. You beat Michigan this year. If you beat all the other teams that you're supposed to beat, including Minnesota, I know it was on the road and they were surprisingly undefeated. Win that game and lose a close one to Ohio State, you could have been in the playoffs. But instead, this would have been a top 4 matchup this weekend, top 3 matchup. They blew it. Running away to a different team isn't going to change that. So that's where I'm at with Franklin. Like, it's the same stuff people knock Harbaugh for. At some point, you have to start winning the games. Like, I know, okay, yeah, you're playing a tough team on the road or so-and-so, but you either have to beat that game and then you can't complain about Ohio State then because you lost that margin for error. Don't say, oh, well, it's a rigged deck because Ohio State's so good right now. There are rumors that Ryan Day could jump to the NFL. They started to heat up a little bit this week, and I was shocked at it at first because he's only been a head coach for a year. But if he jumps and Franklin jumps to USC, then what? Then the Big Ten East is wide open. Because I don't know if you're going to have a coach that can fit in. Like Ryan Day was groomed by Urban Meyer and put in a situation to win. If he has his sights on the NFL and he leaves, like, I don't think he's going to have another coach lined up this fast. Maybe it takes him a couple years to get there. I mean, if he wins a national championship, why wouldn't he jump if that was his ultimate goal? Maybe that's why the rumors are heating up. Teams think he's going to win a natty and jump to the NFL. And I wouldn't knock him if he did. I'm just surprised that it has happened so fast. But do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I mean, to me, I kind of go back to some of the stuff that you were just saying with Franklin, and I don't know that he would be a good fit with USC. I think that the tools there, it's a higher profile position, but they just haven't had the coaching. I think they're in a spot too where they got to get everything squared away with their athletic director and make sure that they have the stuff in-house to get settled first before they launch into that. I think once they get some stability in the administration level, I think it's going to help the program down through the ranks. That they're going to, once they have someone consistent there, they're going to be able to pull who they want from California. There are athletes there, but I think it's just diluting all the stuff in the Pac-12, and I think that's why the Pac-12 isn't well received within the college football playoff system. But I think if Oregon wins out, I think the SEC is actually going to knock themselves out with LSU and Georgia playing. I think the winner of that one's going to get a shot in the playoffs, and I think that's going to open it up for Oregon to kind of back their way in, so that you're not going to have the two teams playing out.
To be honest, I don't know. Well, let's look at the rankings. This is the last thing we have for the show. College football rankings came out, and to me, it's unbelievable because they have LSU number 1, Ohio State number 2. I understand that Ohio State could be number 1, but because if they beat Alabama, I understand LSU at number 1. Then they have Clemson number 3. After that, you still have Georgia and Alabama. I don't think Georgia should be there. To me, Georgia's resume is the same as Penn State's, but worse. Penn State only lost to an undefeated team. They beat Michigan. Georgia's best win is a team that got destroyed by Michigan. I mean, that's fact. And then they lost to a crappy USC team, South Carolina. Since I don't want to get people confused as we're talking about Urban Meyer. How was Georgia that high? And so I brought up a couple computer rankings that were used in the, let's see if I can find them, that were used in the BCS back in the day. And the Saragan ratings from USA Today, he has Georgia 5th overall. He has Alabama 3rd. So I don't know how he's pulling these, and he has LSU at 4. Surprisingly, he has Michigan at 8, ahead of Penn State, Wisconsin, Notre Dame, all of them. So he highly rates Michigan. I'm assuming that he's highly rating like efficiency or something, because Michigan's very efficient. Otherwise, there's no, and that would be all the same reason Georgia's so high, because their wins have been very efficient. Otherwise, I don't know why they would be up so high. So then I'm looking at the another one was the Massey ratings, and they have Ohio State number 1, LSU 2, Clemson 3, and Georgia 4. So even the computers have Georgia rated so high. And to me, it's shocking. And that's only 2 of them. They don't really do the BCS combination anymore. But at some point, you're looking at how are your losses. These same computers also rate Michigan much higher than the actual polls, because this one has Michigan 8, the other one, or one of them has 10. Michigan's at 8 in the other one. And they have 2 losses. Although the Massey has Penn State at 5, which I think is closer to where they're going to be. If you're going to have Georgia that high, Penn State should be right there, even with them, or higher. There's no rating for me, unless you're using bias from last year or previous year. There's zero reason Penn State should be lower, at least that much lower than Georgia. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's fair to say. I don't know. That was the one thing that kind of blew my mind, is that how you can even remotely put. They talk about if Clemson was going to lose an ACC game, immediately it's they don't deserve a spot. Their strength of schedule is horrible. They're being penalized for a weak non-conference schedule, and they don't deserve a spot in the playoffs. You lost to an unranked, multi-loss South Carolina team. That should immediately eliminate you from contention. It was a bad loss. It wasn't like it was a fluke last-second play. It was a bad loss.
Okay, so I found the Cully matrix. I didn't think this was updated, but they're using the actual BCS formula like a composite, and this is more of what I thought the computers would look like, so maybe I just pulled two bad ones out from my search. They have LSU number 1, Ohio State 2, Clemson 3, Penn State 4, Georgia 5, then Oregon. And then they have Cincinnati 7, which I think is what the shocker, but people that followed the computers back in the day, even if you're from a different conference, you can be ranked that high. Cincinnati's only loss, I believe, is to Ohio State. So they're in the same boat as Penn State. They just don't have a quality win like Penn State does. Oregon, their situation is they don't really have a quality win, but they lost to Auburn. And so if you're weighing losses, they should be behind Penn State in my mind. But it only makes sense like when you finally combine all of the computers that Georgia falls way behind. And then they actually have Alabama 9th. But I also think some of the computers take into place injuries. So Tua should have dropped off. It's surprising to me that they have Alabama ranked so high with his injury when in the past in bowl games, they have made it clear that if a player gets injured, your team is going to be looked at without that player. So that's why I don't know if the rankings are really on point this week. It seems like they're trying to just drum up controversy by throwing a bunch of SEC teams in there, knowing that they're going into the weakest part of their schedule and trying to do something funky with Ohio State if they were to lose. Because what happens if Ohio State loses? Do they drop them all the way to 9th with Penn State? Or does Penn State jump back up into the top 4 or 5? That's what I want to see. Because that will be very telling. How does Georgia not drop? Ohio State has been destroying everybody, including Cincinnati in their non-conference. I know it's not like a big-name program. Where's the balance?
I think with the way that this ranking is right now, I think they set it up knowing that more than likely you're going to have another SEC loss somewhere along the line. With Alabama having to play the Iron Bowl with Auburn, and you have Georgia and LSU having to play again. I think that could really shake stuff up. And I do think that with Tua being out, that Alabama is now vulnerable.
Yeah. I mean, they have to play Auburn, so we'll see what happens, but it's going to be crazy. They dropped Auburn down to 15th, but Notre Dame keeps falling. Notre Dame blew out Navy. Unless Navy came back in that game, like I thought that was a statement win for Notre Dame after a lot of people picked them to lose to Navy. So for them to fall after, I guess some team might have jumped them. I think they were 15th last week. Maybe I'm wrong. But like for Auburn to stay ahead of them, I just don't see it. Like Auburn beat Oregon, then they lost every other big game they were in. Like they have one big win. I mean, at some point the losses have to matter. Because otherwise, why isn't Michigan ranked in the top 5 then? If their 2 losses came to top 15 teams. Like, I just want to see some consistency, and that's why I hate the committee. And I hate, even if they expand the playoffs, unless they do automatic bids, the playoffs will never be playoffs to me. Like, it's just not a fair system. Like, you're telling me 3-loss Auburn is better than, like, a 1-loss Boise State or Cincinnati. Like, Cincinnati lost to Ohio State. That's it. But a 3-loss Auburn's better than them? Will they beat them? Possibly. I mean, UCF beat Auburn, though, that year. And everyone's excuse was Auburn was like 3 or 4 losses that year. That's why UCF beat them. Well, then why are they ranked so high? And that's my final bell thought. Don't rank them that high to begin with if they have that many losses. If it's not a big win for a national championship. What do you got for the final bell?
Well, had a pair of things. This week we had Roberto Clemente's wife pass away. So respects that for the Clemente family. And also, on the other side, Miami's officially been eliminated from the ACC Coastal. So that means, once again, like the past 16 years, that means no chance of an ACC title since joining the ACC. And they've only had one appearance ever in it and got absolutely slaughtered. So something positive to hang your hat on this week.
But you're also forgetting Pitt. If Pitt wins out, they have to play at Virginia Tech and then Boston College. And if Virginia Tech then beats Virginia, Pitt will be your Coastal champs.
And get another crack at Clemson.
Which would be funny because as I've been looking, I don't think any team that was going to be in the playoff has lost their conference championship game yet. Funny officiating. No one knows. That's why I want to get rid of the conference championship game. If they're not actual playoff games, how do you know a conference isn't going to mess with that? Like if Baylor would have been undefeated going into their conference championship rematch against Oklahoma, do you think Oklahoma would have got a fair shake at officiating in that game? That's my conspiracy.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure they would have, because after the last time Baylor got left out, but they choked and
they pulled in the Falcons.
Yeah, it was bad.
I saw that they had the kiss of death. As I was watching, they posted the graphic up 28-3. No one has ever lost from there. I was like, oh, that's a kiss of death. And sure enough, they laid.
Wait, that was a score, 28-3?
I believe.
Because we know teams lost. That was the exact same score of the Falcons Super Bowl, wasn't it? And that,
yeah, well, they said in college.
But it just happened last week. Didn't Michigan State, weren't they up 28-3 against Illinois?
No, I don't think it was quite that bad.
I think it was that bad. Let's look that up real quick, because I'm pretty sure that they had the exact same thing as the thing. So I'll look it up before we get off the show, because I'm going to look up both, actually, because you said, I don't remember, it was Baylor and Oklahoma. I didn't remember them going for, maybe it was worse than that.
Baylor was 28-3. No team has ever blown such a lead.
Let's look.
No, I think it is Michigan State, though, to be honest.
Michigan State was... Does this tell me? Does the box score give me a breakdown of the actual score? Or would it be the recap should tell me, huh? Oh, no, the recap doesn't. Oh, wait. There it is. Down 28-3. Illinois became its comeback when Peters threw a 46-yard touchdown. And then in the Oklahoma game, it was... Let's see. Does it tell me that one? I need the same tidbit. They didn't write a tidbit on that one. Oh, yeah. Here it is. You're right. Baylor took a 28-3 lead in the second quarter. So maybe their lead was earlier in the game, because I thought neither of those were the halftime score. Strange. 2 games back-to-back weeks with the same exact score had comebacks from the team that came out flat. We'll end the show on that. So thanks for listening. Go to southboundsports.com. Check out all your stuff. If you need or want us to see or cover anything, let us know. And hopefully Steelers get a win over the Bengals. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.